So this meeting is a meeting of the residents. The board is not sitting as a board tonight. So the first order of business is to call for nominations for a moderator.
Madam Chairman, I would nominate Ken Goodman. Payback, Ken. Madam Chairman, I would nominate Dan Parks.
It's gonna take a while.
Your second,
A second for Ken.
I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
We have to have a runoff election.
That was for him, right?
No, the second was for you, Ken.
You didn't accept my nomination?
Yeah, there wasn't a second. Are you declining?
I didn't hear you call for a second.
Is there a second for Ken?
No, for him.
Oh, for Dan? I think we already took the vote for you, Ken. It's a lot.
I appreciate it.
Let him in.
I can't get here. I'll go.
Sorry about the mess. Watch the cords there. Thank you, Ken.
Same thing happened in Gaza.
I hope the results are different.
The first thing you need to do is recite the oath of the moderator. To do that? Sure.
I, Kenneth O. Glidden, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Minnesota faithfully for and on behalf of citizens in Northern Township. Discharge the duties of the office of supervisor of the town of Northern. We become a city already. In the county of Beltrami, state of Minnesota, to the best of my judgment and ability. So help me God.
So this is the order of business, of course, so you do just order of business and then just kind of the things that you need the motion. Then, of course, when somebody does. Yeah, that would you state that. You can do that.
I wasn't aware that the railroad went through Northern Township anymore.
There are some chairs up here.
Well, we need to have the minutes from March 14th, a year ago. Do we have those?
Yep, they're on the table,
Do we need to read those?
not unless it's called for.
Motion to approve.
Who was
We
that?
have-
State your name.
Scotty Allison.
Is there a second?
Daniel Mark, 10:45.
Any discussion in relation to the minutes? Not, we'll call for the question. All in favor of approving the minutes from last year, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Have the state of the township.
So I'm just gonna sit if that's okay with you guys. I'll try to speak loud, and if you guys can't hear me, just let me know. First, I wanted to thank everybody for coming today. I appreciate it. This is the best turnout I've ever saw for an annual meeting, so that's very much appreciated to see all of you coming here and getting involved. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jess Frenzel. I'm the current chair of Northern Township, and I want to introduce our board quickly too. This is Chris Lane, our vice chair. I'm Mike Kelly, our supervisor. Gary Bernard, another supervisor, and then Kurt Bloomhagen, our other supervisor. So that's our current board, and Mary Israelson is our town clerk right now. Again, thank you guys very much for coming. It's been my honor to be the chair of this for the last couple of years, and I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a busy few years. The big thing that we've done this year that's happened is that we have left joint planning. We are now planning on our own. We've been fortunate to employ Mark Borseth, sitting over there as our as a consultant, helping us prepare for our own planning and zoning as we move forward. We've created a planning commission that is going to be meeting this month for the first time. And we'll be starting to look at cases that are out there, some getting some resolved, and then new cases as they come forward. So that's where we're currently doing for our planning and zoning right now. And we're very excited to see what the summer brings and hopefully a busy year. I wanted to also, with that happening, thank the city of Bemidji and the joint planning staff for the last 15 years. We've worked together cooperatively for those years to plan together. But our board felt it was time to move on. We had a different vision of how planning should be done and how the staff should, what their roles were. So we felt it was a good time for us to move forward in a different direction and do this on our own. Like I said, it'll be a busy year. We've started a little bit already. We had our first planning, our land use permit came through this week, which is exciting to see happen. And like I said, I'm sure there'll be a lot more. The last couple of years, our town board's been very aggressive. We've done many things with different projects that we've been tried to pursue. A couple years ago, we pursued a project over in Elliott Road with the city of Bemidji, and we've called LRIP funds. We're able to get that paved, and now this year we're pursuing additional funds for a couple of road projects that we'll talk about in our road plan here shortly too. We've also, as I think many of you and all of you are probably aware, that we've continued to pursue protecting our waters in Lake Bemidji and looking at a sanitary sewer project, and we're going to discuss that further too. It's involved a lot of work by our board. We've done pursued monies from every basically available avenue we've been able to think of. We want to make sure that if we do this, that it's as cost effective to our residents as possible. We think that's very important. There's a lot of land we're trying to cover here in this area, and so we want to really make sure that we can get every bit of help we can, so this is not a financial burden on anybody in our township. We continue to see really strong growth in our township. It's very exciting to see, like over a few years ago, we saw like the median income for our township was about $75,000 a year. That's a very, very strong number. We've have a population right around 4,000, and it's a very impressive number. That's more than some counties have in northern Minnesota. So and to even think that's even greater, if you look at all the annexation that's happened around in our township in the last 15 years too, it's even more impressive to see how we've maintained such a strong growth and in a lot of development in our area and in good areas, and I think hopefully positive development. I also wanted to take a chance here to thank a few people here who have mainly one for sure, Doug Kranick, who's been our treasurer for many years, and he retired this year. He's done a great job for us, and he's not here tonight, but he's been here for, I don't know, many, many years. And like I said, we have a replacement now in Crystal Peterson. She took over just recently, and so we're very excited to have her on board. Also wanted to thank, we have a couple planning commission members who have been here for a long time, who served on our JPC with the city, and they've moved forward. We have some different planning commission members now. I think we announced that or put them all in our newsletter recently. Alan Stefan and Michael Gramlin both did a great job for us for many years, and I wanted to publicly thank them for their service to our township for those years. Also, like I said, I wanted to recognize our staff here. Mary Israelson's been our clerk for a number of years, and we're very appreciative to continue to have her support and her leadership with that position. Mark Borseth is a consultant who's helping us with our planning and zoning, and Mark Fuller is our engineer who we hired from Freeburg and Grund, who's been helping us with different projects, with sewer projects, and also just our road plans too. Diane Dockeroff, I don't know if she's here tonight or not, but she's our deputy clerk, and she's been started helping us a couple years ago too, and that's been a very great asset for us too. And then finally, Tim Began's our road supervisor, and I think he's somewhere hiding in the back too, but he's been around for a couple years too, and it's really important, and we're very thankful to have him also. Finally, I just wanted to thank you again for attending. We have a few different reports we're going to do in a little presentation also, and at the end of our presentation for our sewer project, when we talk about that, we'll open it up for questions and go from there. So I look forward to any thoughts you guys might have. So thank you again for attending tonight, and we look forward to anything you might have to say later. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Road report?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm gonna stand because I'm a lot shorter than Jeff. And when you came in, there's a sheet there. We talk about the road projects that we've recently done and that we're in the process of doing, which is always a big part of our budget. And I want to talk about the South Lake Mobile Tavistock reconstruction that we have, it's 99% completed. And that was a big deal. We reconstructed that road, made it wider, put some walking lanes in, and resurfaced the whole thing. Thank the residents for putting up with that for, it was a year and a half plus, but that's necessary to leave our project sit over the winter to firm up. Jess alluded to a couple projects that we would like to do this year that we're waiting on funding. And one of them is the Wild Plum Beach Lane area on the other side of the lake. It would actually be where you come off of Whitetail and it starts gravel there, and then it comes around the corner and it gets down to Lavinia. It's a short stretch, but it's a real problem over there. It's real sandy. It's a piece of property that we're fortunate to apply with the Department of Natural Resources because and get some funding, because it also comes to our public landing over there, our Beach Lane landing. And the state provides funding for roads and maintenance that comes into public landings. So we did qualify for some, or we hope we're going to qualify for that. That funding is like 75% of the project. Northern would be responsible for 25%, which includes the engineering on that. So we're estimating that we would have approximately $110,000. We're only going to do that project this year if the state funding comes through, which we will know about probably by the end of April. A bigger project is the Fairgrounds Road, which we applied for a different funding for, which is the LRIP funding. And that's like a north of $1.1 million project. And the biggest part is the reconstruction at where Urban Avenue and Fairgrounds meets, up by former Tom Stop, Northdale Oil. Because when you drive in there right now, it's a 80-foot, 90-foot wide turning lane. And our road actually, by definition, lays underneath a part of our right-of-way, runs underneath their canopy. That shows you how far off the building is there and how far off everything sits. So the road itself would be more defined. It would move to the north a little bit. There'll be some turning lanes. And then we would also reconstruct and overlay from all the way from Urban Avenue down past the Fairgrounds and coming out up by Jackstown, Lazy Jacks. So we're looking at trying to do the whole thing. And that particular situation, almost 100% is covered by these LRIP grants. If we get it, we'll have approximately $110,000 in it because of engineering and incidental costs. We have to move some stuff that belongs to Northdale, or aid them in moving some of their stuff. There's also containers over there for refuse from the Beltrami County. That's got to be dealt with. So there's some ongoing things there. But those are the two big projects that we're looking to do this year if we get funding. And we're pretty hopeful that we're going to get funding on it. So if we don't end up doing that this year, it's possible that we would move up our Werner Road project, which would be the overlay of, the blacktopping of Werner Road, which is our northwesterly road that we have that is not paved. And it's it's a strong mile. It runs from 22 all the way down to Whitetail, Whiting. Yep. So that's, if we don't do that, we're not going to try to do all three projects this year. So if we don't do either one of the others, then we may be able to move on Werner this year. Other future projects that we continue to look at is East Lake Mobile Road, which we would like to get reconstructed. That's been a project for a lot of years, but it's kind of held up just because of a road design and some property that we would have to acquire to be able to do that. But that's still something we want to look at. North Garden Lane, Whitetail Road, Center Point, Winter Sumac. These are all some of the other roads that we will be looking at as we're coming up. Projects move up and down on the road, priority based on needs. I mean, we have done a lot in this northwestern corner, but we have some super good development that's been occurring over there. Some high quality homes are being built up over in that area, and those lots are being snatched up. So we're really fortunate to have that northwestern corridor right now for the growth in the township. So consequently, the board has spent quite a bit of money you have spent quite a bit of money on roads in that area. That's all I have. That's where we're at. Any questions I can answer? If not, thank you.
There's one guy back there. Mike, one
You
there.
have one question.
Are you aware or informed of anything the county will do on county road from like Rutgers to the golf course?
Yes,
What's happening there?
we're in the mix, if you want to call it, with that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about our sewer project. Because the county is working with us to give us the time that if we end up doing a project on the north end of Lake Bemidji, that we don't dig that road up again. So they've actually pushed their construction to work with us a little bit on that. I don't see it happening in fiscal 24, but for sure in fiscal 25, I think the county is going to say, if you can't do what you're going to do, we have to move forward. But if we're going to be burying pipe in the road bed, we only want to have it dug up one.
Any other questions? Rural fire,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. That would be me again. This year, on the 1st of January, I took over as Northern's representative on the Rural Fire Board. And at the annual meeting in January, I was appointed treasurer of Rural Fire. So there's just a lot of things going on with Rural Fire and our cooperation with the city of Bemidji. But some of the highlights this year on the fire department has to be the fact that we went a whole year with no civilian deaths, no major injuries. It's a big thing in the, for the whole rural fire area, which is 17 townships and 2 cities. And some of those details are listed back there. But in Northern in particular, we had 5 actual fires that they responded to in Northern, and only 1 major structural fire that resulted in about $30,000 worth of loss. So the advent of Station 4 over here is helped a lot of us with our insurance rate. Even though we lost the fire department's ISO rating, we didn't get it for 2024. It actually went down. It does not affect anybody in the residential market, but it does affect interest rates in the commercial market. So commercial could see some things, tick up on their insurance again, whereas residential it won't affect. 2 of the big things that Rural Fire accomplished this year was we purchased through Rural Fire, through all 17 entities, we purchased a brand new fire truck and a brand new tender, north of $1.3 million by the time they were equipped with all their soft goods that go along with them. Those 2 units actually end up downtown at Station 1, but in Station 4, which is our station, gets the next, they trickle down. So we don't get them here because they're the frontline equipment. They go to the main station where they're dispatched out of there. So we're happy for that. But we have we have our own engine over here, and we have our own tender over here, and we have some wonderful volunteer firefighters that respond to this station. So when you see a firefighter, you give them a hug. I think the biggest challenge Rural Fire is facing, and you will see it in what's happened in our budget for the last 5 years, is the increase in cost. Those 2 pieces of equipment I just told you about are examples, but staffing is a big issue because the area is growing so much. It requires more staff. We have another fire station that has to be taken care of. So Bemidji Fire Department, which is the city of Bemidji, will be requesting more staffing as we move along here in the next couple of years. And it's a byproduct of our growth. It's a byproduct of all the buildings that we have to be protected. So it does cost more, but we're working hard to try to keep it down. An interesting number for you is that Rural Fire provides about 43% of the whole fire budget for the whole area, city of Bemidji and our 17 other entities. Northern Township share is 226,000. Excuse me, Rural Fire's share is like $1.2 million, just short of 1.2 million of the whole fire budget. Northern Township share is almost 20% of that. little over 20%. At this year, it'll be $226,000. And that number has just gone up big time in the last 6 years. But we hope we've kind of plateaued for right now, but that is a direct result of what you'll see on your levy request. Any questions?
There's a nice report that the fire chief does. I just made, copies of a couple pages that are back on the table there, but it is normally on the City of Bemidji's website. I looked last night, it wasn't, this last year's wasn't on there yet, but it should be on there. So that's available to anybody that wants to take a look at it.
Thank you, Mike.
Treasurer's compilation report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Peterson, and I am the treasurer of Northern Township. I'm here to present to you the financial conditions of the township as of December 31st, 2023. I'm going to be referencing the dark blue sheets that you may have gotten by the door to start off with. The fund balances as of December 31st, 2023 were, on the revenue side is at, or the revenue fund is at $233,259. The road and bridges was at $961,580. Rural fire had an ending balance of $7,632. The Wobble Sewer District was at a balance of $14,204. Our new Bemidji Sewer District had a negative balance of $40,629. And our other federal funds program is at $228,562. The other federal programs is a one-time relief bill from the federal government to help offset the COVID expenses. This fund can be used for projects from March of 2021 through December of this year, 2024. The township funds are currently invested at at First National Bank and at Security Bank USA here in Bemidji. The investments of these funds is registered by state statute. At the last annual meeting, the total projected fund balances of December 31st, 2023 were the revenue. Again, I'm going to be referencing off of the sheet. The revenue was projected at $131,646, and the actual was the $233,259 with a variance of $101,613. The roads and bridges funds. Our projected balance was $830,103, and the actual was $961,579, with the variance of $131,476. Our other federal programs, we had projected a balance of $189,474, with our actual balance ended with $228,562, which is a variance of $39,088. Rural fire, our projected balance was $6,826. Our actual balance was $7,633, which was a variance of $807. Our sewer district, our projected ending balance was $12,520, and our actual ending balance was $14,204, which had a variance of $1,684. Our Lake Bemidji sewer district, we had nothing projected until 2023, but we ended up having a negative balance of $40,629. Our total projected for 2023 was $1,170,569. And our actual ended up being $1,404,608, which an overall difference was $234,039. The variances come from increased interest rates at the banks on these funds, which we've seen that the interest rates have been good. Road projects that were either overestimated or not quite completed. The total balance of the end of 2024 is expected to be at $1,146,196 and $995,471 at the end of 2025. This will be discussed more in detail during the budget review of this meeting. The proposed levy for 2025 is $1,008,525, which is a 5% increase over the 2024 levy. The total increase would amount to $48,025. For the year 2023, we are not required to have an independent audit and submit it to the state auditor's office. This is based on the total annual revenues received by the township. The 2023 dollar amount requiring for an audit is in total revenues of over $1,223,000. And our revenues in 2023 were $1,188,522. Unless there are any questions, this is my report, Mr. Marty.
Any questions?
So,
Lot of
the
information.
numbers. Yeah.
Thank you. Budget review for 2025. I assume that's you as well, Crystal?
The budget review, the budget was the light blue sheet that you received. It kind of breaks it out during the, for the different revenue or the different funds that we have that I explained for the revenue fund, the road and bridge, the road fire, and so on. And each one has its own section as far as the income that we'll be receiving, hopefully, with, and then also the expected expense.
Would probably take a little while to go over that in detail. At some point, if you got some questions relating to that, at any point, we can always take a break and address those questions. But if there aren't any questions right up front, we'll move along here. Take a while to get through that. Well, we're here to set levies. 2025.
So there will be actual 3 different motions for different funds.
Right. Who wants to address that?
Did you do that too?
Would you like me to make a motion? I'd like to make a motion to accept the revenue fund for 2025 of $284,130.
Is that for one particular?
That's for just the revenue fund.
Yeah, we need 3 different motions here, so this is just the revenue.
Just the revenue fund of $284,130.
Is there a second on that before we have discussion? Carla?
Thank you.
Discussion. Any discussion? So we will call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.
I would like to set a motion for the road and bridges fund for the 2025 projected levy balance of $482,895.
I'll second.
So
Any discussion? That's for the road and bridge fund. Hearing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the 2025 projected levy for the rural fire fund of $241,500.
Second? For second.
Gilly.
Any discussion on the rural fire? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We need to set the time for the next annual meeting. And proposal is March 11th.
Well, the annual meeting date itself is set by statute. We do have a little wiggle room when it comes to time for an annual meeting. We don't have our elections, our township elections on township day. Ours are with the general election, so we have a little more variance on when we can have our annual meeting. And the last many years it's been at 7 o'clock. So we would need a motion to set the annual meeting for whatever time.
I move that we have it at 7 p.m.
I'll second it. Linda Arnold.
Yep.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Other business, update on the sewer and water project.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just 1 second while I pull up a little small PowerPoint presentation here. All right. So we've all talked about this for almost a couple of years now. We're going to be covering over some things we've talked about before, but just kind of get everybody up to speed where we're at this point. Starting off actually first here too, with this is kind of like a nice little tidbit. This is something that we had shared with some of our Congress people that have been working on for funding. Back last year at some time, there's this website, I don't remember the name of it, or that's it actually right there. So niche. There's some kind of a community aggregate website, and they're just throwing up a list of the best places to live in Minnesota for 2023. And as you can see, we're up on there. So that's really cool. We are a desirable community to live in. We all take that very seriously up here and want to make sure that it stays that way and continue to improve. You'll notice a lot of the names that are up there on that list too are all cities, right? Big cities down in the Twin Cities area. There's not a lot of townships on that list. So again, just a cool little tidbit there. And then to give a little perspective again, I'm sure, most of us all living around here, we kind of have a somewhat of a grasp of this, but Northern Township up here in the top middle, these are populations. They are older numbers. This is the only map I could find at the time. So don't worry too much about the number because it's not exactly 100% accurate. We're more like around, do you remember, Mary? It's like 3,500 or something.
A little more than that, 3,800.
Okay. So this is obviously pre-annexation. We're a growing community. It's going to be that big again. But just keeping in mind, look at the relative population to the communities around us. As far as townships go, we're a big community. And if we've been talking about this, before, to turn into a city at that population, we're a pretty big city. Like we'd be in the top 20% of populations for cities in the state. So just keeping all that in mind and perspective as we move forward. So the wastewater project in specific, a little bit of background on this again too. This is something that isn't new. It's been discussed for decades. I have 1976 on here. Last time we had a meeting about this here, somebody actually stood up and had mentioned that it had been talked about prior to that even. I think back into the 60s at some point in time. So easily can say that this is something that's been on the community region agenda for 50 plus years. What actually sparked this all kind of coming to a head here in the past few years, where some septic systems in the area, specifically I'm sure everybody knows Rutgers being one of them, had some issues with failures. There is a lot of other septic systems just in general that are very old. I'll show you a map here in a second of kind of the general ages of all the septic systems. And then some of the other really big systems that are along the lake here, including the DNR headquarters, in the state park itself, they need new systems. So there's just a pretty strong need, especially when you consider some of the big systems that are around the lake, for some sort of a solution. And then also, and this is probably the biggest thing to keep in mind for why we're trying to move so quickly on this too, is that the County Road 20 road on the north end of the lake there, they, as we all can tell, badly need to replace and upgrade that road. They've of course been trying to combine that with some trail improvements and other things everybody's really excited about in the community. However, for what we're talking about and putting in a wastewater system, if we can combine those two projects, it saves everybody a lot of money. We've been throwing around the number about $1.5 million potentially. It's substantial. So if we can pull this off, coordinating those two things, as Mike also alluded, we prevent ripping up the road twice, but we're also just going to save a lot of money on the project to begin with too. So as I mentioned, here is the picture map, what have you, of some of the septic system ages. This one I think was back from 2020, so the data is a little bit old, but just by the colors is pretty much all you have to look at here. You can get a sense for what's going on. The red one is the ones that, of course, the oldest septic systems there, about 26 years, in fact, in particular, and older. And there's quite a lot of red on there. And then as I already mentioned too, the state park specifically, they are in need of something. And then the DNR headquarters over there too, they are looking to replace their septic system as soon as they can, or of course, hook up to this system if we're able to make it happen. So some of the initial planning for this go around here, as everybody's well aware, we were in discussion with the city of Bemidji for a while there, hoping that we could connect to their system. It really made a lot of sense for multiple reasons. And it looked like for a while there that was actually what was going to happen, but it did fall through, as things just do sometimes. Then after, and actually during that process too, we were knowing that if this is going to happen at all, we needed a lot of funding. And so we've been reaching out to all kinds of people along the way, a list of some of the people up on the screen there. And thankfully, this kind of a project is one that a lot of people can get behind. Quite honestly, every step of the way, whenever we've reached out for partners, people to support us, it's always there. Everybody really wants to support this project. They know how long it's been worked on, and it will be such a big benefit to the entire region, let alone our community. And then, as everybody is also probably aware, last year we were awarded a $5 million award, a grant on the federal level. That was with the 2023 congressional directed spending. And then I can also update everybody today. You maybe have seen, because it was in the paper locally here just this past week, we have heard that we are in the final bills for the 2024 congressional directed spending that just went through the Senate and the House. Again, that's federal dollars, and we are in there for $1 million. And all that's left to happen on that one, as far as I'm understanding, is that the president just has to sign the bill. So hopefully that will happen. It seems like it's going to happen. So we can update that 5 to a 6 at this point. And it's another really big win, quite honestly, to have that much money at this stage in the project. And that's just federal money too. We're going to talk more about what we've been doing on the state level, which we hope to see some traction with this year and next. So we already mentioned things fell through with the city. When that happened, we had to start looking at alternative plans. And a couple rose to the top. One was that we were looking at some sort of a pond type system. That'd be like an open air system. There's a lot of reasons why that would be a really good option, and it still is a really good option. The thing that became tricky with that was finding the right site where we could put it that would make it viable. There's plenty of space in the township that we could put it, but some of them are so far away from this location, it just isn't viable from an economic standpoint. One of them that did come to mind, and really at this point, if we were going to be able to do that type of a system, was over here in this section, section 36 of the township, and that is state trust lands. So we did have to talk to the DNR, who is the one that manages those state trust lands around the state. And there's a lot of, I don't know exactly how to put it. We'll just say a lot of challenges with securing that property. So it is still an open question. It's something we're looking at because there's lots of reasons why it would be a good option for us. But at this time, it really isn't looking like we could do it with the timing, especially. And again, just kind of going back to, everybody knows how bad that road is on County Road 20, and we're trying to coordinate those two projects together. We need to find a solution that's going to make that happen. And it's really looking like that probably isn't going to happen. However, we have another very viable option at this point that we're excited about. And that is a mechanical package type plant. We do have our engineer here, Mark Fuller, by the way. So if we have any technical type questions, he's going to be the guy that will be answering those for us. But I can just give you the really high overview. We don't have all the specifics. Of course, we're still working on some of these details, but what would happen with this type of a plant is that it's a much smaller footprint, considerably smaller footprint than an open air pond type system. And from what we've seen so far, and at least how I think of it in my head, is it's not too much different than just like a big like warehouse type crates thing that you see on shipping things, or even the back of a semi trailer. It's probably a little bit bigger than that, but it's an enclosed unit. And it's something that just gets made somewhere else and it gets delivered to us in like one piece. But a lot of the other components to this entire system will be the same no matter what. Like we're talking about putting in some sewer, wastewater type lines all around the lake here. And if one of these configurations that we're looking at right now would put it over on this side of the lake still here, then they would just connect to this mechanical process plant there. So at this point, just before we move too much further on, I want to point out a few key things. One of the things is that when we were working with the city before, we were just considering this part of the project. Okay, so we were at that point just going to be doing the north side of the project. But as soon as we started looking at alternative options and seeing that the system most likely is going to go over on this side of the lake, it really at that point becomes just more economically viable when we're thinking of the longer term to do the entire project, right? It just wouldn't make sense. Before we could have stopped over here, and the majority of the rest of the lake would have been a bigger expense than the initial part of the project. But now that we're talking about coming over here, finishing off the rest of the line to go our entire northern township shoreline really isn't that much in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about the proportion of the total project costs. So that's one of the things that I personally am most excited about, is that this project went from being, you know, still really an awesome thing, putting in a wastewater system along the north side of the lake, to something that potentially is going to protect 100% of the northern township shoreline of Lake Bemidji. And then if you just looked at the entire lake itself, that's over 41% of the lake. Of course, the city does have some of the other side of the lake already sewered too. If this comes to pass, at this point, the vast majority of the lake is sewered. I mean, this is a really big deal. Like I said, we've been trying to work on this for decades from what I've heard from people. We could do something that's going to set the entire region up for a long, long time into the future, with a really good way to protect Lake Bemidji, water quality speaking. So some of the proposed schedules, again, just keeping in mind that County Road 20, because that's really a big driver of a lot of this. We're still working on securing some funding at the state level, especially. That's kind of the next step we're at. We do have several partners that we've been working with, in particular our local representative, Grossel, and then Matt Bliss has been another one who's helped us a lot in the past and is going to be helping us moving forward as well. We will need to secure the specific land, wherever that ends up being, that we'd put this process plant. And that is another strong point, positive thing I think about moving this direction too, that's worth pointing out. We already mentioned obviously what happened with the city. We already mentioned what happened with the DNR and the county school trust lands. If we go this route, we'll be working with the county most likely to secure some land from them. And they've just been an absolute wonderful partner throughout this entire process. And we've already started discussions with them. They have multiple options that are available for us, and they're more than willing to work with us. As far as like securing, like actually if we purchase a land, say, from them, this type of a route is going to be so much more cost effective than if we had to buy an entire section potentially of land. So there's a lot of actual economic benefits up front with that kind of a plan too, this mechanical process type plant. So then because of the federal funds especially, the second item on here is that we will have to do quite a lot of extensive environmental assessments, archaeological type surveys. And so that's probably the thing that would happen first this year. We need to get that going as soon as possible. And then our tentative goal, which is still going to be pending on some of this funding, is that we would be actually doing construction next year, 2025. And as far as we've heard from the county too, that is their intentions with the road, County Road 20 as well. So hopefully everything goes smoothly from this point on. That is something that is viable and will come to pass. It is a big project, as you saw. It'll probably be a 2-phase project at the very least. So the initial phase would be along the north ends to wherever the package plant goes. And then there probably would be a second phase that would be the next following year. We're talking 2026 at that point, and potentially putting in sewer lines along the east side of the lake all the way to the southern border of the township. So then we've talked a little bit about the financing already. At this point, we are thinking that the project's going to come in around 19 million. So it's a lot more than what we were talking about before. But again, before we weren't talking about sewering the entire lake. And this is going to be absolutely impossible if we don't get more funding. So the funding is what we're working as hard as we can all the time to secure. And as I already mentioned, we've been very, very happy at every step of the process here, because whenever we reach out to people, senators, congressmen, what have you, they're more than willing to help us with this project. This is just a project that people can really easily get behind. Lake Bemidji is just such an iconic lake. It's right on the Mississippi headwaters, beginning of the Mississippi River. There's just a lot of reasons why this affects not just our community, but the entire region. So, and I just mentioned too, is potentially as a two-phase type project. If we were just going to do that first phase, we're looking probably at around $12 million in project costs. I mentioned we already have $6 million now at this point. So, and in reality too, we have to spend 20% of that ourselves just to access that money. So we already have over $7 million that would be pledged to this project at that point. So to make up the difference, that's why we're working with our state representatives at this point and see what we can come up with for state funding. That was the next point. And then we do, yeah, that's worth mentioning. We did also put in another application for more federal funding. We've had good success 2 years in a row with that. We had Representative Pete Stauber, our federal representative, out here last fall. And he's been just awesome to work with as well, pushed all of our projects forward the past 2 years. They've been successful. He saw what things look like on the ground here. He was very positive about everything that we're doing. And he said, whatever we can do, we just got to find a way to get this done. It's just kind of about keeping momentum going, which we have plenty of. He was very positive, like I said, about what we've accomplished already, and hopeful about what we can continue to get what we need to do to get this project across the finish line. So then just wrapping up, again, the main impetus behind all this is to protect the lake, right? This is a body of water that is very important to us. Of course, we live here, but it's everybody else too, right? It's the state, it's the Mississippi headwaters. It affects really the whole country, right? All the way down to the end of the Mississippi River. So any way that we can help be good stewards from an environmental standpoint, this is a project that will really help with that. Again, this is realizing some goal that has been worked on for decades around here, 50 plus years. And then I think it's really important for residents, especially ones that live right along the lake there, to keep in mind that this type of a project is going to free up space on your own property. So there's a major benefit for you. In the past, you've had to keep aside portions of your lands for septic systems and drain fields and whatever. When you do something like this, that frees up land for you guys to do more things with on your own property. And then we've already mentioned some of the bigger septic systems that are along the lake. They badly need to do something. So they would gladly, as far as our discussions with them have been so far, connect to this system, because then they can do exactly what I just mentioned. They can make better use of their own land as well. And then I really want to make sure that we make a point of this too, because we have operating as a city. We strongly feel that this is the best way forward if we're going to make any kind of traction on something like that. Everything that we've looked at going into talks about incorporation says the main thing that you have to prove to, because it goes before an administrative judge, is that you're functioning as a city. And in a lot of different ways, we already are. But something like this really just kind of takes it over the finish line there. It's hard to even think of a reason why they could say that we're not functioning as a city at this point. So if and when we're able to make this happen, that's probably just going to be the next step almost immediately after. And again, that's something that I personally think that we would have a very strong likelihood of achieving at that point. So with that said, I think
Can I add something really quick? So I wanted to make a couple quick additions to, like, I've Chris covered so many of the things that are so great. A couple of things I wanted to mention also. One of the things, like we talk about getting support for this, it's really encouraging because the world is very partisan anymore. Like, this is one of the things that we seem to have bipartisan support on. We have Senator Smith, Senator Klobuchar, Representative Stauber. They're all supporting this project. It's kind of nice to see something that everybody's kind of getting behind, that everybody sees the positivity. We're seeing the same thing on the state level. It's really encouraging. Something like this is getting support from all sides, and it takes a lot of work by everybody to do that, but we've been very fortunate to have that. I also wanted to mention, like, to make this job or this project what it is, the DNR is a very important partner of ours, and more than likely we'll have to work something out with the DNR how to kind of get through there, and they've been a great partner to figure out how to work with this. A lot of the things why some of the stuff with the pond system makes it very difficult. There's a lot of a lot of rules and stuff that are in place that are not decided by anybody local, but our local DNR office has been absolutely fantastic to work with. And we really, we're going to be working with them more and more to get this thing completed in the very short future. So as Chris said, I think we'd like to give a chance for people to ask some questions. I'll let you go first. I'm sorry, you're going to state your name?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, you go ahead. You pick on people. You pick on people. No, no, you do it.
I'd like to know, my estate in Phillips is on the east side of the lake. I'd like to know where on the east side of the lake you're thinking about putting that. I don't know what number 36 is or whatever you call it. What are the streets or what are the roads or where is it?
So there's two different places. When you're talking about section 36, that's down in Elliott Road. That's not where we're looking at going right now. This property is up here off this purple spot. It's right kind of over by Whitetail a little bit. And that's not an outdoor plant. That's like an enclosed small mine, smaller than an acre, probably build. It's a smaller building, but that's where it's at over in that area. I think right off Whitetail and Welcome. Am I correct on that? Been out there, that area? Big Bass
Yeah,
Road.
that's one of them. It's actually right over by my house. So I live right up in that St. Moritz Court area up there. But as I mentioned, it's county land, so we're working with them on how the fine details would work out with that. And then as just alluded to, it's an enclosed box. So as far as like eyesore would go, there's hopefully not going to be hardly anything. There's a lot of trees around it too, and we'd like to obviously keep that as much as we can intact. And then as far as smell and things like that go too, it being enclosed, it's going to be much different than you would experience with a pond system. Although that being said, it's probably worth, and Mark can fill us in more if people have specific questions about that. Those things usually only happen like once or twice a year when they have this turnover process where that's even a consideration. Well, Mark, would you like to take that one?
Much updated version of what was on Wazo Road. Yep. That's a mechanical plant as well there.
Yeah.
In the past, you talked about using the rearing ponds along Glidden Road and stuff. Is that no longer in the picture? Or?
Yeah.
For a pond system, we wouldn't be able to use there because we have setback issues. We need a 1/4 mile setback for a pond system, so that wouldn't work in that particular area. And when we're talking about a mechanical plant, we need high ground, so that wouldn't work for that type of system either. Setbacks being the predominant downside to that particular chunk of land.
Excuse me. I was just curious about the size of this mechanical plant. Is it being sized for anything future or further to the east? Or?
So nothing further to the east, but yes, for the future. So what we've accounted for in our design sizing here is the current build out, additional parcels that currently don't have residential structures on them, whether that's a zoning issue or whether some of those back lake lots are being used for septic systems but cannot be built on now. Additional sizing for where zoning standards would allow more fixtures or more bedrooms in a particular place. Certainly, we expect that Rutgers could take more advantage of their property. The state park would likely take more advantage of their property and potentially provide more services. And the DNR has always been looking to kind of consolidate some of these offices into one. So those flows would all come into play in that, yes. So to shorten that up, future and build out.
The plant, is it manned totally?
No, not manned continuously, if that's the question.
Right.
Regularly, but not continuously.
Okay, so it runs on itself.
It does. Yep. It'd be a very similar train or very similar process to what happens on the south shore of Lake Bemidji between Bemidji and Irvin, but just in a single unit. Same exact mechanical process, but again, just in a single, it's a single process. It's not disjoint from building to building as those are. We don't have the flows for this type of system to bump up into that municipal type system where you see those different various buildings having different various purposes.
Where is this discharge?
Discharge is hopefully going to be right on site and potentially underground, potentially. Depending on where we discharge, we have different limits that we're required to meet. So the surface water discharge that you see for Lake Bemidji has particular limits. If you're going to discharge underground, you have different limits. Some of our pond systems that we alluded to having looked at before can also discharge to the surface or can be irrigated. A lot of our communities irrigate. all of those come with a different standard for treatment. So it just depends on what we end up finding when we get a parcel figured out and figure out what soils are there.
And then if I could just add one quick thing to piggyback off what he was saying, for future use, I think it's a great question and something to keep in mind. And we've thought about it too. Let's say that 20, 30 years down the road, I mean, who can predict how big we're going to be, what's going to happen? One really nice advantage with this type of a system is it's completely modular. So we put one of these boxes right out there right now. 20, 30 years down the road, again, who knows? Maybe we need to double our size. We just put another box right next to it. It's pretty much as simple as that, right? The price of the box, is that what you said? What would you say?
1.5 million ballpark. And along with that, and we're certainly talking about at this meeting, Northern Township, but recognizing that most of us live here because we like this kind of area, there's potential to protect some other lakes as well in the future, but that hasn't been discussed with any adjacent townships. It's just there is that potential there. There's also potential to serve other lakes within the city, or excuse me, within Northern Township. The main predominance of what we've been directed to look at here and our impetus for driving this is that 1,000-foot lakeshore buffer. So that's what we're looking at, is that shoreline buffer, and anything that touches that is what we're aiming to protect right away.
That was kind of, Scotty Allison, that was kind of my question, Ken. So you're saying 1,000 feet from the lake.
Correct.
So, okay, so like, how far?
So if you looked at, for instance, and I could pass a map around here actually, but if you looked at that corridor along 20 from Rutgers until the country club, you can envision that you've got about as much on the lakeside as the backside there. There's, let's say there's 300 feet or so on the lakeside, and everybody varies. And that leaves you 600 or 700 feet on that backside. So up halfway up Crown Hills Court, for instance, or those first row of parcels that are northerly of County Road 20, those would all fit. When you get over to Lavinia, everybody on both sides of Lavinia would be in it, all the way down to Waville, both sides of the road there as well.
But how far out? Like, okay, you've got the pink thing, okay, that you'd have, okay, and of course that's going whitetail out to Big Bass, okay, and you've got the green, and that's the only area that is getting the sewer system, or is it everybody along that side that's in?
So there's a distinction there, if I understand the correction or the question correctly.
How
There's just a distinction between our collection area, which is all of this northern town boundary to northern town boundary within 1,000 feet. So when we see the golf course parcel, for instance, it's well larger than 1,000 feet, but we grab that whole parcel to highlight it. So that boundary here is only about 200 feet. We're not serving on the other side of Old 71 right now. But when we get to here, we're serving both sides to get 1,000 feet and carrying that all the way down as well.
Okay, so like where the part, I think my mind won't say the right word right now, but okay, the actual container, okay, being on in that property.
Sure.
Okay, so when I'm looking at that map, I want to make sure that I'm understanding it right. So everything in green is what is being served.
Yeah, green with the potential for what's in orange.
Put it on the west side of the lake, where that.
On the east side of the lake?
East side, oh yeah, the east side, I'm sorry, yeah, the east side of the lake, okay. Between that stuff is all the way up to Bass Road. So what you're saying, only a portion of that, it's not gonna go all the way to Bass Road.
Correct.
As
Correct.
far as
It
where
wouldn't go
you
all
would
the way
have
over to
the
Big
septic.
Bass.
No.
It
No.
won't.
No.
So the people there that are technically right off of Bass Road and they have the cul-de-sacs and things like that, they're not gonna be in that. It's just that green portion that is
Green and cyan there.
down there, yeah, okay.
No, and where you live, Chris, is a very good example. St. Moritz would not be included in that. It bumps up here, though, at some point, depending on what those flows end up, because we have to estimate that ahead of time. And there are certainly very good tools we use to estimate, but it's still an estimate. If folks that are not in that collection area initially want to add on, that can be an option in the future. Typically, however, what we see and the way these systems work, and the thing that's driving this is we've got small parcels, high groundwater, or poor soils. So when you have a large parcel, you can continue to replace a septic system across your parcel. When you have lower groundwater, that is groundwater that's well below the surface, you can do a cost-effective septic system. And when you have appropriate soils, you can. It's only driving it where we have high groundwater, poor soils, or small parcels. That's really what drives projects like these, especially in that lakeshore bank. So it's very coincidental, but well thought out that shoreland is protected for a reason from that state level, and that's where this 1,000-foot ban comes from.
So that's where when we started looking at this stuff, that's I'll kind of piggyback on that too. We started figuring what needs it, I mean, we're not excluding to say this is never going to happen anyplace else. It's the only thing we want to do. This is just, when we started going to the state to start looking for money and for what needs to be done, this was the area that's considered protected or sensitive overlay area. So this is what we figured we need to do and protect. And we've been dealing with this with planning for many years. And this is kind of where, this is the starting point, and see where it goes and how this works. And that's our plan right now.
Well, this is the first I've really myself have been involved in
Sure.
hearing this. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding it and I don't walk out of here like,
No,
well, what did I go there for?
we're here to answer questions. Everybody, please go on.
Pat Dockendorf, Lakewood Drive. Two questions. One, we're up on the hill in Lakewood Drive, so I don't think that would affect.
Not right now. It's not in plans.
Is it a directional board system or are you digging the roads up? Just
Portions directional board, but predominantly direct bury, so full excavation. And that's where we really come into pretty important timing again with the County 20 project. That would take up a substantial amount of this since we're already going to be opening that up.
I just saw on the reservation, I think they directional board a ton of it up there, and I would imagine that's way more cost effective than digging the roads up.
So typically, if you weren't going to tear the road up, it might be, except when you get this dense, you end up with having to have substantial excavation and substantial dewatering, because our water table is relatively high there, certainly. So it all would have to be dewatered, and then you'd have kind of a cottage cheese mess there with this density. If you're getting stretched out to where residences or connections are up to 500 to 1,000 feet apart, it can make sense to just do those small connections. But where we're tighter here, you know, where we've got some of these houses that are going to be back to back by 70 feet, as some of you know, we just end up destroying everything on the surface anyway.
So you try to dig them in as you're laying the line, you protect as you go.
Correct.
Rhonda Dockendorf.
Same.
I live in the same house. Everybody that's in the area shown in green, are they gonna all be required to hook up to the system? Will it be optional? Has that been talked?
So when we started this with the city, if you guys don't care if I answer this, I can go. Years ago, when we started talking about, our plan is that if something like this happened, we would probably do like checking to see if a system was compliant. We probably wouldn't immediately require that hookup. If something's non-compliant, we would require hookup. We would have to we haven't talked about dates yet, but our thought is that we would say there'd be a sunset date at some time that we want people to hook up. Generally, I think most project people realize that it's most beneficial to hook up when the project's happening. But there's places that I know people have spent money on recent systems and they just don't need it right now. And we want to be aware of that and be not forcing things when people don't need it. But there would be we would be doing checking to make sure they were compliant. And as long as they're compliant, we would keep that up to the owners. That's our current plan that we talked about a couple years ago. We haven't discussed it in the last year and a half, I'd say probably, but that's, I think, where we kind of had left it last time.
I see some potential problems there because you're gonna have some people, I mean, the bulk of people should understand that this is gonna work real well, but there's gonna be some that swear up and down their systems working well, you're gonna have to basically force them to. I've been involved in this kind of work, I guess, for many years, retired long ago, but anyway, I was just kind of curious, if you don't mandate it or whatever, I can see some individual hooks and everything else along the line as you're going, you're trying to get the road rebuilt, you know, and that's when costs start to go, you know, you hold the contractor up, his costs go up, everything else, so it's almost something you should be, to me, I mean, I would have to recommend that if you're in that area, it should, you know, pretty much be mandatory that it's hooked up, I would think.
know if anybody was here around when the other projects happened in the past time. And did Mike, you ever like how that was kind of handled with other projects and stuff? Or I know it's not a popular project, but I like that we have it ready we have it so the line is there, so it would be right there, so that would be available.
And that needs stuff else.
Yeah, that's what our talk was in the past. Like I said, it's not been talked about for a while, but that's the way things have been done kind of in certain areas in the past, I believe. And I don't think it's just unique to Birchmont, I don't believe.
I guess I've seen like up in the International Falls up the lake and everything. There's a lot of people that, for their system was working good. It's in a rock pile here and there, but it's, right here and they pretty much had to get them all to get on board to make it work. I think the potential there, all of a sudden you're gonna have somebody fighting it, if it takes one or two, you got some problems. So something you gotta look at, I think, seriously.
I appreciate that.
And basically, it's very much like what you're talking about, but it's also a combination of what our chair said, is that some people have recently put in new mound systems for, upwards of $10,000 to $20,000, depending on. And if they're a good viable system, we are not in the position where we want to force something on people like that. But there's going to be a whole host of properties, when you think about 400 plus properties, potentially being served in this project, there's going to be a whole host of projects that are going to have to be inspected. And if you're non-compliant, and at least that you're 80% compliant, you might choose to do it. But I'm sure we're not going to be able to mandatory make everybody that has a workable system. We don't want to do that. But the economics are coming to play, folks, because once the system is in, it's still got to be utilized and paid for on a daily basis. And there's still going to be some sort of an assessment. There's still going to be some sort of a monthly fee. So the more people on the system, utilizing the system, the better it is for the overall cost. So that's something that the board and the citizens are going to have to discuss and come up with. The city, just because they run a sewer pipe by your house in city of Bemidji, you have time. If you want to hook up, you can hook up, but if you have a workable system, you're not, you have maybe 5, 10, 12 years. I don't know what exactly the policies are. So that has to be decided. But your point is really important.
Would the environmental services be responsible for inspections then, like they are on private systems, or?
Well, before, our attorney advised us before that this is something that Northern Township will have to put in as a policy / ordinance. That all properties would have to be inspected unless they voluntarily wanted to hook up. So, if you look at the data, I just had a new system put in 3 years ago. That's probably not going to warrant a very expensive inspection.
I think as we're talking about numbers, I'm sorry to cut you off there. Mike mentioned about 400. As we were talking about sizing for the future, right now what we're looking at is that initial startup. If the whole thing is constructed, we'd have somewhere around 355 single family residential connections. So it's not the golf course, not the DNR, not Rutgers. Again, about 355. Into that future question and fit in with what Mike was saying, we're planning for about 426 single family connections. That would be that long-term build out.
Have you had projections as far as based on those numbers, monthly fees or anything else?
To some degree, yes. To some degree, it's so dependent on. It's so dependent on how much more federal funding we get.
But I mean, if you get the project completed, I'm just talking about, okay, once it's in and running, based on, it stays paid for one way or another, you're taking a bond out or whatever, hey, you're gonna have a monthly fee coming,
We're trying to match that to other municipalities, and if I'm not mistaken, and anybody can correct me, but we're looking at trying to get that in the ballpark of $40 a month. Is that correct?
Yeah.
We're looking at attempting that as that baseline figure, being able to look at Bemidji as an example, just for instance.
Yeah.
Whether that ends up at 38 or 49 or what it ends up at, but as a calculation basis, that's kind of what we're looking at.
So I'm assuming that the fees that we're talking about will go to only the people that can hook up, not to the rest of us who are in the area of the sewer.
Will we be assessed for the sewer?
Our plan is for the fees as far as to this project, it's not to assess the fees to every landowner. The fees are for the users. That's our plan.
But I think it's important to say too that, there's a 20% match for, no matter what funding we use, we have at least a 20% match. So if it's a $10 million project, we still have $2 million. That $2 million has to come from the township. It's very well may get assessed back to the user, but at some point in time, the township has to come up with their share. And that money doesn't all come back to us the next year. It's, as people hook up, it might be 5, 6, 10 years. So consequently, the township could potentially be bonding for $2 to $5 million, and that is on the backs of all taxpayers, with the idea that the assessed area will be paying it back. But it doesn't mean we don't have an obligation. We're not looking for a district for the whole township to be in a sewer district.
So before we go on to that too, I think the important part to remember is we talked about this when we talked a couple of years ago. We talked about the reason for looking at this project. This is a very high tax base area that's paid a lot of taxes throughout the year on the Lake Bemidji here. And we've invested, there's not much road work that's happened to that, but they've paid a lot of money. These residents over there have paid a lot of money. So this is just it kind of all we work together. That's how we manage our township, is that it's going to be paid. Certain parts of the roads and certain parts of this project need to be paid for by the township as part of the expense of it. We realize that, but it's remembering that that these people are residents that have paid a big part of the township taxes for a number of years and helped us develop these roads up here, up in Whiting Road and Town Hall Road and all these different areas that we've really done a lot of work on. And it's been because of our partners that are residents that live in that area. And so they're a huge part of our township. So our reasoning why we wanted to do this funding and this grant money is because we are trying to limit that down to as much as possible. And we really think that we have a very good opportunity to keep it down to a very minimal amount of the township impact. But the intent is to pretty much most of it be assessed through the users, with probably some of the road work that has to be done that will probably have to be paid for in our road projects, just like any road is. So.
But can I get one more question? The assessment, you said spread throughout the county, right? Or isn't it going to be the area, per foot?
Yes.
Yes.
Whatever
Yes,
cost that you
but-
have to make up.
But I'm just saying is that
The county, the township itself would have to fund this and the interest charges and stuff. But the actual money is short for building that piece. Would that go to all the taxpayers in the township, or?
So what the chairman,
People being, that area being served?
what the chairman is saying is the bulk of it will go back to the area that's being served. But there will be a certain amount of money that all residents will be paying for, some of the road replacement and things like that.
Yep.
So, but the idea is, just like with any municipal service, is that it's a user pay situation. And typically on a lot of these things, it's damn near 100% assessed. There was many years, folks, that we couldn't do this because our income was just too high around Lake Bemidji. There was no funding. Doc Thompson would talk about this forever, about the fact that we couldn't get sewer around Lake Bemidji because the income was too high. There was no ability for federal or state funding. Well, that's kind of changed. So if we can secure a large percentage of state funding, federal funding, it should help lower that cost dramatically. The one thing nobody has said tonight, and I want to bring it up, why it was such a good idea to pair with the city when we could. We would be responsible for infrastructure, and we were going to get water and sewer. Water and sewer. It was going to help. It was going to be a big thing for fire protection around Lake Bemidji. We're not in a position where we can try to put in a water tower and try to put in water at the same time to serve the whole area. So the project itself has changed. It's changed. The board has had to shift directions.
There's a question back here.
Just a quick one here. I'm Greg Gilbertson. I live between the DNR and Rutgers. My wife and I got married in '85. So we've been living there ever since. And we've heard a lot of this stuff, the septic, the road and everything. And I worked for MnDOT for 43 years. And I'll tell you what, the thing go back and forth. But we need to move forward with this. There's a lot of good ideas. It's wonderful, but it's like, we're gonna have to take some hits, but Just move on. It's a wonderful place to live.
Will there be assessments for, like, for instance, Rutgers?
Yes.
Um,
There'll be, yeah, there's gonna be the large amount of, there's a whole formula of how to do this. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head because there's formulas to figure this out about the users and square footage and stuff, how that works. I don't even know how they'll work on the market. If you know at all how those formulas generally work, enough to talk about this one specifically
For funding the project.
for assessments to,
You know, it's pretty common to do, I work for a different city, but, you know, a project like this, one of the, kind of the finance package that we looked at so far is, you know, these tremendous grant opportunities with federal and state grants. Then there's gonna be a gap that probably won't be funded with grant money. That would typically be the township selling bonds to raise money to fund the rest of the project. And then the debt service payments for the bond would come from assessments and user fees. The user fees would be more to operate the system. The assessment would be more to pay the debt service. And what that would be would depend on what that gap is and what the board decides to set as their assessment policy. But typically you would only assess the benefited property. So if the property can't be served with sanitary sewer, you can't really assess that property because you have to prove the benefit of the value of what you're assessing. So the assessments would be for the properties that could utilize the system. And those are typically, typically close to what they can bond for in an interest rate, which, that's yet to be determined, but it's going to be below typical market and probably a 12 or 15 year period of time.
I wanted to say too, is there anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask a question, who wants to ask one? I know some people have asked a few, but I want to make sure there's people who haven't had a chance. If you do, please raise your hand.
Some online too.
Just online.
Quick question, where are the collection lines on Birchmont Beach Road? Is it gonna be directional borne? Is that going on the highway shooting back into County Road 20? What's the status of that?
When we look at the current, I'll be honest right now, the current plan is that we are going to Rutgers and stopping right there right now with the current phasing that we're at right now. We know that we looked at some of the stuff with the Birchmont court areas. It's not that we are not looking at doing that at some point, but right now the priority is to get to Rutgers and get through that County Road 20 project because that's where the road construction project is right now. We're open to more things, but that's where it's kind of at right now. So we haven't really got into those details yet.
Should we try to grab a couple?
Sure.
Al Hansen, Logwood Road. Could you put your map back up, please?
Yep.
Logwood Road, I assume, is in the light blue.
Yep.
And that's paved about
At the earliest, yeah, probably. Yeah.
Now, some of you remember our mini system, 20 of us on Logwood Road. Okay, that must be gone. Now, I assume once that is completed, our system will go away.
The very minute we could turn the light on.
Because we just spent 1,000 or so to refurbish that a couple years ago. So I was just curious what the future holds for 20 of us.
We have a few questions online. I think Chris said he was going to try to grab.
Yeah, so Bruce Peterson online, I see your hand is up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, it had to do with the assessment and whether you, and you've discussed quite a bit of it. It's hard for me to hear from the general discussion online. I'm also a resident. I have a place on the North Shore and was curious about the assessment. But also you had mentioned that people with a compliance system, if somebody didn't have a compliance system and it would be cheaper for them to put in a compliance system than the sewer system, would we be able to do that? Or would we have to, our only option would be to hook up?
Again, we haven't made final things, but our initial discussions is no. That if we offer these services, we'd be requiring a connection at these places that they're available. Once they're available, we wouldn't be allowing for separate hookups. That was our initial discussion. We haven't taken a formal vote on it, but that's where our discussions have been in the past.
Okay, and then on the question of the assessment, as I say, I really couldn't hear somebody put out a sort of an estimate of what that would be. I know it's contingent on what money we get, but Is there
Really?
anything like that?
We really don't, I don't know if we really have it. We haven't really got into the exact numbers of assessments yet. Before we would kind of finish up, we would have to probably put that assessment hearing together, wouldn't we? I mean, I don't know the process. I don't, Mark, you've done these before. Like, could you answer that quickly?
Sure, yeah, so if you're gonna assess, people for a public benefit, you have to have an assessment hearing or a project hearing. Project hearing before the project to give, you invite everybody that could potentially be assessed, give them an opportunity to, learn more about it. Mark would have cost estimates available at that time. And then at the end of the project, there would be an assessment hearing, with the actual amounts, what they are. So there's a couple opportunities for public input.
Okay. Thank you.
We had for
Yep, I
questions?
think that's it now.
Any other questions?
I'll try one thing. On Highway 20, will they be at least maintaining that road this summer? Because it's getting terrible over that way. It's getting chewed up there.
I'll
Will they
just-
at least maintain it?
Well, I don't like to speak for them. It's not really fair for me, but I know that they're aware of the road condition. They've said something. So the counties I know tried to take care of their stuff, and like I said, it'd be inappropriate for me to say what they're gonna do for sure, but I mean, they're aware, and I would venture to guess, but like I said, I don't want to speak for the county highway department for sure, but
They are, as alluded to earlier, so we're doing the design for that road actually, and they are waiting, just as Northern is, on that LRIP funding response. So they're really hopeful to get going, very, very much so.
Can I ask a question if everybody's done on on this?
Sure.
Or should I wait till we?
are we fine?
So I don't know if you guys have tried to thank you all for all the work you've been doing on this. This is awesome. So I know it takes a lot of work. Has anybody heard on the Red Lake HR 4780? Where they're trying to take back Red Lake, all public lands north of a certain line on a map? Is that going through Northern Township, and how does that impact Northern Township itself? Red Lake,
Has been introduced in the House.
Yes.
And in the Senate first.
there's a map that shows a red line coming down. Here's Red Lake. And there's a red line coming down like this, so it's quite a bit further
I
south
haven't seen.
up Red Lake. I have it on my cell phone, but it goes down quite close to Lake Bemidji. So no one has heard of that.
No, it's not been brought to our
That's
attention.
very new legislation.
It was introduced in 2023, but just wanted to make you aware of it, that they're looking at giving back. What's it called, tax forfeited land and federal forest land to Red Lake.
Sure we'll do more about it.
I'm sure you will.
Do you have a number?
Yes, 4780.
House file?
HR, yeah, HF 4780.
So if anybody wants any more information about that, you can look that up online.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whiter is reservation right now, it's in the house.
Yeah.
Up to their trying to take. A lot of land.
160,000 acres.
Any other questions in relation to the sewer, the septic system?
Or can I say one thing? Or if there's any questions about, I know we've talked about a corporation before. If you have any questions on that, we try to answer them the best we can.
I was going to ask about that, but I think you already answered my question, because it looks like getting this project is really gonna be a major
Catalyst, yeah.
that's really gonna put us over the hump in doing that. From my recollection, when this whole project got started here about 2 years ago, you had a public meeting and asked the residents of Northern Township whether we wanted to become part of the city of Bemidji or remain a township. And I think we all said at that point in time, we want to be separate. We don't want to become part of the city. And so this is an outworking of that. And it seems like, you know, the alternative to solve the problem for Lake Bemidji was to have them annex, which the city required, and to become part of the city of Bemidji. So this is the alternative, I mean, from what I see, as to how this has unfolded since then, and seems like the only way to go.
That's very true. And I appreciate that because that's where this started. And so what we're doing is with that in mind, that this isn't with that we're doing this project just for incorporation. That's not why it's being done. We're doing this project because the timing is right. We have partners with the county, with the federal government, with all these places that are willing to like fund money at some point. We know this project is not 100% accessible to the residents. There's no way the residents in this area could ever afford all this area to go through here to get what it would take to do this 100% assessed out to the people. It's just not possible because of the lay of the land and the distance between some of the houses and just the way it's worked out and what it's going to take to do this. So with the County Road 20 project, with federal legislation, with government cooperation right now, we know that's a time right now. With that, it could lead to incorporation. That's not the catalyst, but it's we've heard you guys say too that that's what we want to do this and to make sure that we can protect the county and or the township and continue to grow and offer the services we do. We need the tax base we have. We can't start abandoning, cherry picking more and more often, keep providing the services that you all have expected of us and want us to continue. So that's the best way I think that we feel to do this. And nothing's perfect. I know it costs money. I wish it didn't, but I wish we could say it was going to be a freebie, but it's not. But this is the best way we think for economically for us to survive and to get through this next 20 years.
What happened to the idea of us having our own city?
That's what we were.
That's what incorporation is. Yeah. It's just,
Okay,
so there's steps to do. Like I said, you do like to do that right now. This is the priority. This is what we see right now as a priority, is to make sure that we have this. There's only so much we can really do at a time. And right now to make sure this gets put in place, this system gets put in place, that could lead to the eventuality of incorporation. I mean, very likely, but like I said, it's not the catalyst for what we're doing this. We're doing this to protect the lake and to give the residents the services they need and the businesses, the DNR, the state park, and everybody over there to make sure that they have what they need to protect that area.
You know, from that meeting we had at the fairgrounds a couple of years ago, you know, I think the overwhelming consensus there was to not let the city annex more of us, whether that meant incorporation as a tool to prevent that or something like this. You know, it's individual landowners wanting to be annexed to get the sewer was probably one of our biggest threats. So, you know, maybe this project will meet the goal of not being annexed by the city of Bemidji. You know, as someone who's lived here since the, well, I guess the 50s, you know, I do sometimes have this anger that wants to bubble up at me at the city, just like in our case here, where we're going to get a lot of dollars that are coming from the state of Minnesota, the federal government. The city of Bemidji did the same, but they didn't share very well with it. You know? So, I mean, I do think that, you know, I don't know if this project has capacity, if another township or something wants to partner with us in the future. I hope we're better neighbors than they are.
And we did allude to that a little bit already tonight too, just thinking about future expansion. And as we said, worth reiterating again, this type of a plant affords that option. It really does. So I agree with your sentiments, and I hope that if we were presented with that same option, that we would, you know, handle it differently.
Well, because this project is going to benefit from the people of the state of Minnesota and the people of the United States of America. You know, just like their project did, you know, because I guess I feel as a taxpayer, I funded part of that system in the city of Bemidji, but received no benefit.
You have a very good point. And like I said, there's a reason why Matt Bliss has been such a vocal supporter of this job. He's not a representative for our community. He doesn't represent Northern Township. He does this because he represents from Pennington County. Lake Bemidji feeds these areas. That directly affects them. We can have the same conversation, and it's happened all the way down to Louisiana. What happens on Bemidji starts here and it goes all the way down the river. So that's why there's such good support for a project like this, because it's not just about Lake Bemidji. Doesn't end here. It goes a long ways away, and that's why the federal government has been willing to help us.
So can I play the devil's advocate? If we don't do this, they're gonna annex us and we're all gonna pay city taxes, because they're gonna gobble us up and we're all gonna pay for the sewer anyway, so. It's gonna be worse the other way, right?
And taxes would go up for the rest of us in the township too, because yeah, we would have to maintain basically the same level of services, the fewer people to pay it. So everybody kind of loses. True. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I just want to thank the board and Mary, and the two gentlemen over there, especially for Mary getting that newsletter out the last week, 10 days, that made a difference. I can remember, and Mike, you can remember too, the times that we had an annual meeting, we had 10 people there and 5 of them were in the board meeting. It's great to come together as a group, and especially with those that have concern over what's going on with the possible water septic system and water. So I just want to thank the board for the effort. You deserve a big hand.
One more thing, any of you guys who aren't comfortable answering questions, you can always, we have our emails online. You can send us an email. I know sometimes people don't want to ask questions in public, and I understand that. So if you guys did have concerns or questions you wanted, we'll do our best to answer them. So feel free to do that in the future too.
One last, okay.
Not on this project, but can I ask a general question?
Sure.
So here, I would like to know how much Northern Township, how much of our property taxes goes to Beltrami County? The reason why I ask that is because where I live at, I live in Vital, and the acceleration in property tax valuation, this is friggin' crazy. So I guess, do we have any idea how much Northern Township is taking care of Beltrami County?
I do not know that. Yeah.
I think that's broken down on your tax, on your property tax.
Are you talking about,
No, no,
you're talking about the residents?
Yes,
The resident, how much Northern Township residents contribute to the county tax base
yes.
as an aggregate? I don't have that question answered. I mean, I don't think they'd be able to answer that for us, Mary, could they?
I don't know.
I don't think,
You know, when they say,
Yeah.
well, we're gonna increase all property to 25%, and you start talking around that lake or White Oak or, you know, all these different places. That's a big valuation.
It is.
Going down to that, the county.
it is.
And you're gonna start driving people out of the market if it continues.
Did you have new construction around the area? Yeah. That drives it.
Houses are worth
White
more.
Oak, I'll tell you that.
It's the valuation.
Assessments go up because they're worth more, you can sell it for more.
But the only thing that drives our property taxes is our budgets.
That's
Our budget, the county's budget, the school district budget, that's what drives our taxes. And as long as our budgets, because of inflation, because of growth, because of whatever, as long as our budgets go up, our taxes will go up. You're correct. It's very frustrating to see your assessments go up because it means you're going to pay more, but it's supposed to be, theoretically pretty equal across the border on assessments. But it's the budgets. So when you want to talk about why our taxes go up to the county, the city, or whatever LGU you're talking about, you need to be involved in the budget and just say, we can't afford it. We just can't afford this road. We just can't afford this new courthouse or whatever the case might be. Because that's what drives our budget, our taxes.
So Mike, are you suggesting we revisit our levy?
No, I'm but it's important to know that.
No, you're right.
It's important to understand what drives your taxes. It's your budget.
This is one of the only forms of government that the residents do actually set the levy. That's what you did tonight.
And we wrestled with that levy. Thank you for your support. Basically, you'll see that a lot of our line items didn't go up. It's just inflation. It's the inflation that's happened to every business, every home, and it happened to every level of government. And Crystal had put together a list there of many, many years we were able to hold our levy with no increases because of our growth and so on. But when we lost 3 sections of our township due to orderly annexation, that was well over $100 and some thousand back then that we were receiving into our coffers, that we don't receive. We have to make it up if we're going to continue our level of services.
Luckily, we had a lot of growth that's helped maintain that, because we're very fortunate for our developers, our people who, what's happened in our community. Luckily, we do have a lot of stuff that's happened here to keep that maintained, even though we do have inflationary things happening. We've had a lot of great development in this community, which we're very thankful for.
Well, I think we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. I think you're all in favor. We'll be adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for
very
coming.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.